It was a typical Manchester autumn night, and that meant the clouds completely hid the city from the gaze of the stars and the moon. All that could be seen up above was the abyss tinged orange by streetlights, and of course no Manchester night was complete without a lecherous drizzle that tried to seep into every crevice. The sound of all diesel engines spewed out into the quiet night every few minutes. There were also the occasional noise of an odd roving pack of drunken youngsters. They tried to show both the world and their own insecurities that they weren't insignificant with their screams and shouts. One of these packs upped the ante, and a short, sharp smash of glass was heard. A victorious roar and hyena laugh followed. It was naivety of the highest order to think they thought anyone beyond themselves respected such feats of destruction. Amongst all this, I was impatiently lying on a poorly lit concrete pathway in the middle of Whitworth Park. There was a thin mist that clung onto the ground all around me. I felt cold, wet, bored and tired. For whatever reason, I didn't get the nervous jitters and the screaming feelings of excitement that I usually had before such showdowns. Also, by that point, I'd usually have a giant grin on my face and my legs would be happily shaking. Suddenly, I felt anxiety shooting hot blood through my neck, back, ears and cheeks. A terrible thought stampeded through my brain. What if my move into benevolent vigilantism were to fail? I hadn't thought about the possibility of failure, and it was an inconvenient moment for such a fear to reveal its monstrous self for the first time. The fear found a friend in self-doubt, and both then easily goaded me into thinking that the bumblebees would still die out even if I were to succeed in my quest. The thought of those adorable fuzzy creatures that were filled with colour and delight careening into extinction violently tugged at my heart. I tried to force out such feelings as sadness with angry thoughts about the petulant, profit-driven entrepreneurs who consider such wondrous life to be negligible. However, that was not enough. Such red quickly faded back into morose blue, and the din from my rage could not stop my descent into despair. Soon after came a memory that I had long since repressed. It was of my father stomping on a bumblebee's nest with sadistic glee, whilst I looked on powerlessly. I did not know how, but at that moment I was transported back into that same naked, bloody and bruised little boy who watched helplessly the only thing he ever loved at that house become brutally destroyed. My face started to crack with such heavy emotions treading on it. Soon the tears formed and then snap. I was bawling with no sign of stopping. This, of course, wasn't the plan, as I was supposed to stay quiet lying there on the floor. The idea being the police officers would approach me and get close enough for me to spring my trap. Instead, they found a balaclava-covered man in the fetal position sobbing his heart out. Fortunately, though, the 6 police officers that came to the park still approached me to find out what was going on.
"Where the hell is everyone? I don't see anyone else,"
one of the police officers exclaimed.
"Oi, what the hell are you doing here, mate?"
A different police officer asked me. Previous to their arrival, I had called the emergency services report that a couple of black youths had violently attacked a white male student type and were doing that at this very spot. This was so I could have some sport with the police, but unfortunately my mentality had soured the mood.
"Mate, you need to tell us what's going on here, or you're going to get arrested,"
one of them said after giving a deep sigh. Such orders were of no use. I was barely staying afloat in my melancholy. I simply carried on bawling, oblivious to the world around me.
"For fuck's sake, I think it's just another fucking loon. I think we need to get him sectioned."
"Mate, did you see what happened? Why have you got a balaclava on?"
one tried to inquire sympathetically.
"No use, Tim. I'm telling you, it's a fucking head case, and you probably telephoned us to get us over here for attention. For fuck's sake, if he didn't show up, I'm going to kick his fucking head in."
I heard an angrier voice respond.
"Oi, you retard, fuck. I said get up now, or make sure you regret ignoring me."
The same angry voice barked. Still I cried, and still I was oblivious to such threats, and that was until one of them touched me.
"I said get up."
Suddenly instinct took over when I felt the rough grip on my shoulder. My bawling stopped and I felt all the muscles of my face relax in an emotional state. My eyes opened to see a surprised-looking face. I quickly grabbed the offending officer's wrist from my shoulder and then grabbed his hand with my other hand. The police officer was only able to open his eyes wide before I sharply twisted his hand whilst holding his wrist still. Next, I jerked my left arm back with enough power to throw the kneeling officer onto his back onto the other side of me, and immediately after I jumped up onto my feet. I saw 5 police officers all looking rather anxious. There was fear in their faces for a brief second, but they quickly registered the crying friend on the ground, and soon the expressions became distorted with a desire for violent revenge. I pointed at the compatriot on the floor, pouted, then mockingly pretended to cry. Yes, I know the hypocrisy. Suddenly one of them reached for his taser. Fortunately though, he's not the fastest quick drawer in the UK, and that meant I had ample time to sidestep his shots. I quickly grabbed the insulated wires, gave a violent tug towards me, and the police officer came tumbling forwards. His face ended up at the perfect level for a swift knee. Bleach white teeth rattled onto the concrete before the thud of his body followed. I knew one of them had already circled behind me. Whilst his colleagues came from the front, I swung my head back with perfect timing and heard a slight groan and felt a few splashes of warm blood on the back of my neck. Then before he could recover, I ducked the flying fist from his colleague in front of me, fell to my knees and launched an uppercut straight into the officer's testicles. I followed through with such ferocity that I lifted him up above me into the air. The poor fellow was only able to let out a wheeze before he passed out and thudded onto the concrete. I then felt a quick succession of punches. One went straight to the right side of my temple, another hit the other side, and then one went right onto my nose. I quickly stepped back to regain my composure and face the culprits. I saw an uppercut heading to the underside of my chin, but I moved my head to the side in time, and then grabbed this one by the throat, squeezed my fingers almost to the point of snapping his windpipe, picked him up and slammed him onto the ground. There's no further movement from the officer as he was knocked out cold. The last one who had not suffered any injury tried to turn on his heel and run. However, I was quickly onto him and sent the heel of my boot into his ankle. A violent crack could be heard. He fell to the ground and I gave him another quick bone-snapping stomp on the other shin. Instinct ordered me to turn around, so I did and faced the bloody man charging right at me. I dropped low and jumped at him at the same time as he tried to rugby tackle me. His face collided with the top of my head and I heard a muffled groan before he was silent. I did a quick press-up with enough strength that it flung me back up and onto my feet. I turned around in time to see the police officer with a broken wrist trying to get his taser out from the other side of his body with his one working arm. Before he could do this, though, I picked up one of the unconscious officers next to me and threw him. It was a perfect hit and they both crumpled to the floor. All the police officers lay motionless around me. I noticed that I had a joyous grin on my face while the adrenaline merrily pumped throughout my body. I took a deep breath and let out a sigh of pleasure, the like of which I also reserved for times straight after orgasms. My chest pumped itself up and I slowly sauntered away from the scene. It was a rare and delightful treat to fight with police. Unfortunately, it was an activity I could engage too often, as the risk of being imprisoned was just too high. I chuckled to myself as I now found my previous state of despair somewhat amusing and pondered whether this wasn't perhaps an inescapable human condition to always become anxious over what one held dear. Suddenly my memory let in the most fabulous of visitors, and I remembered that there was, not too far from me, a 24-hour convenience store that sold surprisingly delightful ready-made cheesecakes. Excitement took the helm as I remembered that tomorrow would be the first major step in my vigilante campaign. Of course, most people treat themselves to a little something after the denouement of their hard work, but I wasn't, unfortunately, the most conscientious of sort. Also, I felt the campaign might lead to my arrest or even death, so I convinced myself to go out to have some further fun, as it might be the last time. I soaked up the mood for one last second and quickly walked off the lit path into the park's enveloping darkness. After I was a good 50 meters away and had grabbed my rucksack from behind a tree, for some curious reason I had a sudden urge to look back. That was when I noticed a small black Scottish terrier merrily trotting by itself down the lit path towards the incapacitated police officers. As strange as it sounds, for some peculiar reason I could not help but feel that I had seen the little beast before. As if on cue, a pang of fear erupted in me, and my stomach twisted into knots of every kind. For a reason that baffled me, my gut sensed enough of a danger to scream, "Run!" But rational thinking that I held close to my very being calmly told me otherwise. It was simply a lost black Scottish terrier, and my sudden feelings of fear were probably related to my anxieties about what I was going to do the following day. I turned around and carried on walking, but at as quick a pace, as I could not shake off a feeling of wanting to get away from the place as fast as I can.